Bobby Fischer is most well known for absolutely obliterating his opponents with his famous move 1e4. But what happens when he's the one facing 1e4? In today's video, we'll watch how Fischer completely dismantled his opponent's attack and turned the tables with his legendary Sicilian Najdorf. Let's get straight into it. So Fischer's opponent in this game is Grandmaster Wolfgang Unzicker, and he starts with the move pawn to e4. We see pawn to c5, knight f3, d6, d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight f6, knight c3, and pawn to a6. This move marks the Sicilian Najdorf. Now, in modern times, the move bishop e3 has appeared to be the main line. The English attack is the name of that, but there's also the traditional variation with bishop to g5. There's also moves such as f3 and a4 in this position, and also queen d3 has gained some popularity recently. But the move we see in this game is bishop to e2, one of the main lines as well. And what does Fischer do to counteract this move? He strikes in the center immediately. Pawn to e5, kicking the knight away. The knight goes back to b3, very traditional, and we see the move bishop to e6. Now, a common plan in the Sicilian Najdorf is to fight for this d5 square. Black wants to play d5 and white wants to prevent d5. That's the whole point of this opening. So we see castle, knight to d7. And after f4, we see a very genius move here. Queen to c7. Now, why do I say this is a genius move? Well, firstly, this guards the pawn on e5 a second time. But also, by putting your queen on c7, you're controlling this vital c4 square. So if white decides to play f5, your bishop can go to c4. And that's exactly what happens in the game. We see f5, bishop to c4. And now white responded with a4. What is exactly the point of this move a4? Well, it's a very common theme in the Sicilian Najdorf to play a5, put your knight on a4, put this bishop on e3, and really just control this b6 square like crazy. So the point of a4 is to one day control b6. Here, Fischer plays bishop to e7. He wants to get his king to safety. And we see the move, bishop to e3, developing his final piece. And once again, looking at the b6 square. Simple move, castle now. And after a5, Fischer has a very important move that he has to make in this position. And that move is pawn to b5. You see, if you allow white one more move to play knight to a4 and to put his knight on b6, your pawns are going to be blockaded like this for the rest of the game. So you have to strike immediately. Pawn to b5, pawn takes pawn, en passant, that's not, the board didn't just glitch, en passant is a move. And we see now, knight takes b6. Now for those of you who are thinking this is a tactic, like, can't I just take this knight and once it's taken, the bishop is no longer defended? Well, that's the genius thing, is after this knight is taken, when the queen takes back, white doesn't have time to take the bishop because buddy is in check. So that's what we see in the game. White plays king to h1, and now we see another very clever move, bishop to b5. Now, these moves do not look that natural, but they make a lot of sense, which is what makes Fischer such a great player. Like most people in this position wouldn't think of playing bishop to b5. They would think of taking or taking the knight potentially, but bishop b5 makes sense because Fischer wants to reroute his bishop to c6, where it will put long pressure on this pawn on e4. Now, white, seeing that this bishop is going to land on c6, the light squares will be way stronger for black than for white. So white decides to exchange off the bishops like this. Bishop takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, And we see the move knight to d5. Now this knight is triple forking everything in the position. So black really only has one option here, which is to take it. And after queen takes, you now have a problem with your rook on a8. And I would like you guys to pause in this position, because Fischer once again played a unnatural move. I'll call it an unnatural move. It does make sense. But what most people would play in this position is, I'm sure, rook takes rook, or something like rook to c8, potentially. But Fischer comes up with quite a genius move, and that move is rook to a4. Now, why is this so genius? This rook cannot be taken. If you take this rook, pawn takes rook, you kick the knight away, and once the knight moves, the pawn on b2 is going to be lost. So after rook to a4, white plays the move c3. It's a common idea in the Sicilian, and it's also preparing to meet black's move of rook to c8, which will no longer be attacking the pawn on c2. So now we see the move queen to a6. Fischer is trying to put some long-term pressure on this file. But this rook is protected twice, by rook and by knight. So white is not actually worried about that and just plays the move h3, improving the position. Now we see rook to c8, a potential idea of playing rook to c4 and putting some pressure on the pawn on e4. So white meets that with the move rook to e1, preemptively defending his pawn. And now there should be... everything looks like it's on a good square, right? Except for this bishop. And also, how can black improve the position? Now, what most people would get wrong is when they have a position like this where you don't know what to do, they will lash out and make a blunder. But instead of blundering, you should always just play simple chess. Pawn to h6. Fischer just gives his king an escape square. Very, very simple move. And white does the exact same thing. King to h2. Now, as I was saying, most pieces are optimally placed here for white and for black. White's queen is on a beautiful square. The rook is doing a job here. The rook is doing a job here. The knight is protecting the rook. And here we see all these pieces are doing a job except for this bishop. So Fischer needs to improve the bishop. And how's he going to do that? He chooses to play bishop to g5, putting his bishop on a better diagonal. Now, white was clearly nervous about this bishop to f4 check, so played the move pawn to g3. But now this g3 move actually makes a lot of weaknesses around the white king. And once again, I would encourage you guys to pause the video. And how did Fischer infiltrate these weaknesses? And the answer is queen to a7. Very subtle, simple move, but queen to a7 is threatening a deadly check there on f2. White can never allow this check, so white played the move king to g2. And once again, Fischer really blew my mind with this game because he created threat after threat after threat. There's only one winning move in this position. Of course, Bobby Fischer found it. That move is rook to a2. Threatening to take on b2 with check and then infiltrate with the queen and checkmate. So, in the game, we saw the move king to f1. Now, why did white play king to f1? Another idea could be rook takes a2, queen takes a2, and then simply rook to e2 to defend this pawn. But if this variation happens, we will see the move rook takes c3, and the rook cannot be taken because the rook on e2 is pinned. So that's why we see the move king to f1 here, hoping to play rook to e2 without getting into a pin. But this move is a massive blunder, and white overlooked a brilliant move here from Bobby Fischer. I would encourage you guys one last time to pause the video. And let me just say, after this next move from black, white resigned the game. That's how powerful this next move is. And the move? Rook takes c3. A brilliant move. Now, why is this a brilliant move? Well, this rook cannot be taken because queen f2 will just land a checkmate. So the only other line you really have to consider is what happens if rook takes a2. By the way, in the game, white resigned in this position, but I'm just going to show you guys this line. What happens if rook takes a2? Now we will see the move rook to f3 check, and if the king goes to g2, that is just asking to be checkmated after queen to f2. And what if the king goes to e2? Well, a very simple variation here is rook to f2, and the king only has two options where he can move, and either way, you're just gonna take this rook and be up a pawn and have a winning advantage. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that analysis. Remember to smash the subscribe button. And also, if you would like one-on-one coaching, the link is in the description below. I'll see you guys next time.